During the few months that I had worked there, I had noticed that our takings for the day and sales records did not match. I would often spend half an hour to an hour after work trying to figure out where the errors were coming from, whilst the manager would simply throw his hands in the air and exclaim that he had no idea how this was happening. The recurring issue seemed to be that our cash takings had been recorded incorrectly. There would sometimes be an excess amount of cash that didn't match up to what was recorded on our sales invoicing software. Other times, there would be less. I was at the time an accounting student studying towards my bachelor's degree. I was already suspicious of the cash being out each day. However, given how the manager had been treating me up until this point, I was concerned that any complaint would somehow be twisted and used against me. And boy, was I right. Several weeks later, my manager took some time off. During this time, I managed a personal record in store sales and also noticed something interesting. The cash was never out at the end of each shift. I reported this directly to the owner of the company. Given I was acting manager during the time my manager was away, I was expected to report to the owner every day, and explained what had been occurring whilst the manager was there. In all honesty, I was hopeful that the owner would be having a word with the manager about the discrepancies. However, I was also weary, as I believed once the owner spoke to my manager, that the manager will immediately know it was me who reported this. When the manager returned to work, he immediately approached me with a disgruntled look on his face. "I've spoken with the owner. You tried to blame me for the discrepancies? You should focus on doing your job properly, then this wouldn't happen." I was quite taken aback by how angry he was, though. I wasn't surprised that he twisted it and tried to place blame on me. Given his reaction, I'm even more suspicious at this point. He wants me to do my job properly, eh? Malicious compliance ensues. That same week, I got to work. I started paying attention to what customers were paying when they were dealing with my manager. Behind his back, I began examining all of his sale transactions and invoices with a fine comb. As the days rolled by, I started to find evidence of his dishonesty. When it came to a few cash sales, my manager was doing the following. Example: would tell the customer the price is $200 if he pays cash. Would discount the price by $50 in the sale invoicing software. Would put the extra cash into the till and record a $150 cash sale. Before we did the cash up at the end of the day, he would sneakily pocket this extra cash whilst no one was around, though he was very foolish, as he clearly couldn't remember the exact amount he had swindled. Hence why the cash would be up some days, didn't swindle enough, or the cash would be down, swindled too much. And I took scene shots of the discounts he had been giving on sales and sent them to the business owner, along with a report. A report with a detailed description of my findings. The report also showed that on all days he wasn't there for the cash count. There was no variance. When he was there, well, the owner was infuriated. This man had been his trusted employee for years. The owner was so infuriated, in fact, that he ordered my manager do a mandatory drug test, pee in a cup style, on the same day he found out. And no surprises, he failed. Turns out the manager had quite the meth habit. This was most likely his sole motive for stealing cash, and the owner was beside himself. We operate machinery every day in this store, and so the thought of a manager walking around high as a kite wouldn't sit well with any health and safety professional. In fact, it could have landed the owner in serious legal trouble if any accident or injury occurred under this manager's watch. The manager was terminated immediately for violation of his contract and was later taken to court by the owner in an attempt to recover the stolen funds. Safe to say, I was promoted to store manager position shortly after his termination.
While working as a highly technical person at a male-dominated defense contractor, let's call them Ray Thanos, I fought hard to be respected as a woman and as someone with no military background. As the years went on, I did earn a lot of respect. When I was 48, I fell in love with a man from the same company, but I did not work directly with him. I am not one to flirt or give off vibes at work. I had over 25 years' experience of working in a man-dominated field and built up walls to avoid any workplace drama. However, this man and I had a very special friendship, and we knew this was real love before we even had a first date. There were no rules about dating people in the company where there would be no conflict of interest. But for transparency, we both went to HR to sign a love contract, as Michael Scott from The Office called it, between he and Jan. They didn't have any love contract for us. They just said they would note it, and we were not doing anything against company policy. My team lead was essentially my manager, but received minimal pay to do my actual manager's work. He was great, and we almost never saw our manager, let's call her Lazibish. No one knew where she was most days, and she only showed her face to do horrible things. She fired a coworker and friend of mine because he was neurodivergent, and she had no patience to accommodate him, even though he was good at his job. He would play some game on his phone during his lunch hour, but didn't leave his desk or lunch. She said he was doing it on company time, but being in close proximity to him, I knew he only played during lunch. His mistake was not going to a break room of his car to play, but his desk was where he was comfortable. When Lazibish found out about my boyfriend, she cornered me in the ladies' restroom. The restroom was almost always empty because there were 5 women on our floor and about 100 men. She cornered me and said, "I heard you have a special friend." She was about 10 inches taller and quite a bit more scary than me. She loomed over me angrily, waiting for my response. I just nervously laughed and darted around her to the exit. Was she going to beat me up? Why? Instead of going to my desk, I went to my boyfriend. I was frazzled, and he told me she had come on to him over the years, but humbly, he thought he could be misinterpreting her advances. This is when it came all together for me, and I realized my days were numbered. The Lazibish, who couldn't be bothered to perform any managerial tasks, started stopping by to see me several times a day, each time asking me about my projects and specific tasks. She was not technical and had no idea about the systems and software I wrote, so explaining it to her was a waste of time, but I did my best. After a week or two, she abruptly asked about my time card. I was salaried and didn't receive overtime until after 48 hours, and only if pre-approved. I usually worked 10 to 12-hour days and more from home at night. I was the only person with my skill set, so it was a lot of work. I usually didn't claim the extra time because the pay was the same either way. One Friday I had to stay until midnight for a system upgrade, and even though it didn't matter, I put down a 14-hour day minus lunch because the entire team I was working with put down the same hours. Lazibish screamed and yelled about time card fraud to just me, and her nasty comments echoed through the cubicles. She also threw in a few quips because my boyfriend was part of this particular team, and she made accusations about that, even though it was someone else that put together the cross-functional team to do this. I was so embarrassed and didn't say a word, except to defend myself that I would never commit time card fraud. I've learned that trying to reason with irrational people only prolongs the temper tantrum. I exited the building to cry in my car, because women are not supposed to cry at work. A few hours later, I called my boyfriend to pick me up because I was still shaking and didn't think driving was a good idea. He was already home when I finished my work. He was not aware of what happened, so I began crying on the phone and said, "I hate that woman." It was about 7 p.m. and didn't know someone was listening. They called security and had me escorted out of the building. I was informed that company policy said that profanity was grounds to be fired. What? This was a company of mostly ex-military. Cussing was something almost everyone included in every sentence, except me. I'm from a different time, and it just wasn't something I did unless pushed to the limit. I was told I was suspended and brought back to HR 2 weeks later and asked if I said those words. I told the truth, and they terminated me. But my friends at Raythanos were supremely loyal to me, and Lazibish was demoted to obscurity. Even years later, they tell me they have no idea what happened to her, but she was found out to be a mean girl. I was the martyr everyone respected as a professional, hard-working person, wrongly accused of time card fraud, and the person willing to call her out for attacking an innocent person just because her crush fell in love with me. My boyfriend and I went on to date for many more years, and he stayed with the company. He was professional and only dropped hints about her misconduct on rare occasions. The best pettiness is not too overt and well-timed.
Okay, so first and foremost, when movie producers are looking for places to set a movie that takes place in colonial or even 1800 cities in the US, due to the sheer number of parks, wide roads, and period houses, they will often select Savannah, Georgia. They'll pull all the Spanish moss out of the trees, or trim it back, pour dirt on the roads around the squares, and effectively backdate that part of the city to fit most any place, even up to some having used the area as a setting for places like early Washington, D.C., and even places in Britain or France. Typically, when producers do this, they will pay each homeowner whose house is used as background flavor a couple $1,000s for the licensing to do so. That will be important later. Trust me. They issue some rules, like no electric lights being visible, not coming out of any door that faces the street, and you have to move your automobiles away from the drive, if you have a drive. Well, 1979, a producer came from Hollywood with the intention of using Savannah for that very purpose. Specifically, the producer was from one of the big three-letter TV channels, and was working on making a made-for-TV movie talking about the events after the assassination of Lincoln and the subsequent accusations of the doctor present at his death. The production went to the city to seek permission, and then sent an announcement out to each of the homeowners telling them of the various days that the shoot was going to take place. However, much to their downfall, they also noted that the production company would not be compensating the homeowners for the use of their homes as backdrops. This was met with some great annoyance by the homeowners, who turned to the city for help, only to be told that it was their civic duty to allow the use of their homes. Most everyone agreed to this, and bit their lips. One homeowner, however, didn't. He decided to get revenge on the production, attempting to screw up their shooting every chance he got. He first started by leaving his car out in front of his house, only to have it towed before filming started. He threatened legal action against the studio, but that fell on deaf ears. He forbade the use of his home in some of the shots, but the production company got the city to make him back down. Eventually, enough was enough. So he waited, biding his time until he was certain they were filming. When the day came that his house was being used as a background shot, the homeowner grabbed a massive Nazi flag and hung it out front of the house out of one of the top windows. The production company balked. They knew that this ruined any shot they'd used there, and what's more, they started to question just when he put the flag up. Was it just the one day, or had all the previous shots, some which showed the house from across the square, been ruined as well? They turned to the city for help, and the city just basically shrugged, saying that it was his First Amendment right to do that, and implied that had the production company paid the homeowners, as had always been done before, then this probably wouldn't have happened. In the end, the production company had to end shooting, and go to the homeowner begging for him to remove the offending flag. He did eventually do so, but only after his lawyer got a contract in writing that required the production company to pay all the homeowners for having their homes in the shot. The flag came down, and shooting wrapped in less than a day. Interestingly, it said that in the movie in question, The Ordeal of Dr. Mudd, there are several shots where you can see a bright red Nazi flag flying from one of the homes in the distance. That stunt cost a producer quite a substantial amount of money, and pushed production back at least a year while they tried to find every single instance that the flag flew in the background shots. This homeowner would go on to himself become very famous, though not for a good reason. Even so, he lives on among the legends of that city, both for his revenge against a movie producer, and his later brush with fame.